we bring you the unvarnished truth of law enforcement. This broadcast features unfiltered, unedited, and completely raw footage. Join us as we step onto the front lines of justice, providing a transparent view of the critical moments that shape our society.
Ma'am, calm down and step back right now.
I am calm. Explain why I'm being detained in a public lobby.
You're causing a disturbance. You refuse to leave.
What exact behavior is disorderly?
I haven't yelled, touched anyone, or blocked
I'm not
anything.
It started with a voice raised just enough to echo off the tiled walls of the station lobby. Ma'am, you need to calm down and step back right now. The woman did not raise her voice. She did not gesture wildly. She stood still beside the metal detector, her coat folded neatly over her arm. Her posture, straight eyes fixed on the officer in front of her. I am calm, she said. I am asking you to explain why I am being detained in a public area of this station. It was 7:42 p.m. on a cold Tuesday evening. Rain tapped steadily against the glass doors at the front of the precinct, leaving streaks that distorted the flashing red and blue lights outside. The air inside smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. A police scanner crackled behind the front desk. Low voices clipped code's constant motion. Officer Mark Palmer had already decided this interaction was a problem. "You're causing a disturbance," he said louder now, eyes flicking briefly toward two other officers standing near the hallway. People are trying to do their jobs. The woman glanced around. No one else in the lobby appeared bothered. A man filling out paperwork avoided eye contact. A young officer pretended to be busy with a printer that wasn't printing anything. No raised voices, no crowd, no chaos. What specific behavior constitutes disorderly conduct, she asked. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't touched anyone. I haven't obstructed movement. Palmer's jaw tightened. He was in his mid-30s, 6 years on the force uniform, crisp duty belt, heavy with equipment. He was used to people backing down when he spoke like that. Ma'am, I'm not going to debate legal definitions with you. You were told to wait outside, and you refused. I asked if I was legally required to leave, she replied. You did not answer. That was the moment the temperature in the room changed. Palmer's hand hovered near his radio. His tone sharpened. You don't get to decide how this goes. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant. Inside, time seemed to slow. The woman's fingers tightened slightly around her coat knuckles, whitening, but her voice remained even. I am not refusing a lawful order. I am asking you to articulate one. Palmer took a half step closer. Disorderly conduct. Failure to comply. He said the words like they were already written down somewhere official. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Behind the desk sergeant looked up, then looked away. No one intervened. The silence from the other officers felt heavy and tensional. Turn around and put your hands behind your back, Palmer said. For the first time, a flicker crossed the woman's face. Not fear, calculation. A slow breath in through her nose, out through her mouth. If you place me under arrest, she said quietly, understand that every camera in this building is recording, and every decision you make from this point forward will be reviewed in federal court. Palmer scoffed. He reached for his cuffs. You're not special. The metal clicked shut around her wrists. The sound was sharp, final, echoing off tile and glass. A woman who had walked into a police station on her own feet now stood handcuffed in the lobby, rain and sirens bleeding through the doors behind her. At that moment, no one in the room knew who she really was. The cuffs were still warm when the story began to rewind. Long before the tiled lobby, before the echo of metal on metal, before Officer Palmer ever learned her name, the woman in custody had learned how to survive rooms that were never built for her. She was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 1971, the third child of a school secretary and a dock worker. Their house sat 2 blocks from the river, a narrow shotgun home with peeling paint, and a roof that leaked every spring. At night, the sound of barges moving down the Mississippi blended with sirens and freight trains. Order and chaos existed side by side. She learned early how to listen carefully. Her mother kept a Bible on the kitchen table and a stack of overdue notices beside it. Her father worked double shifts and came home with his back bent and his hands cracked raw. Education was not optional in that house. It was survival. She was the first in her elementary school class to read chapter books. The first to raise her hand when teachers asked questions no one else wanted. By 13, she was arguing with teachers about logic, not volume. By 16, she was tutoring classmates who had already decided the system was not meant for them. She left Louisiana on a scholarship, then another, then another. Each one a thin bridge over a wide gap. College in Illinois. law school in Washington, D.C. She worked nights cleaning offices where powerful people left behind memos she was never meant to read. She memorized legal language between trash bags and vacuum lines. By 30, she was clerking for a federal judge. By 40, she was standing in courtrooms where her presence alone unsettled attorneys who assumed authority came with a different face. She listened more than she spoke. She wrote opinions that were clean, precise, difficult to overturn. She presided over cases involving wrongful arrests, illegal searches, excessive force. She cited precedent. She cited facts. She sent more than one officer to prison, not because she enjoyed it, but because the law required it. Her rulings were quoted in law reviews. Her name appeared in appellate decisions. She never raised her voice from the bench. By the time she took her oath as a federal judge, she had already learned the cost of composure. Officer Mark Palmer's education looked very different. He grew up 2 states away in a small suburban town where police were thanked at grocery stores and waved through traffic. His father had been a corrections officer. Dinner conversations centered on control, respect, compliance. The world was divided into people who followed instructions and people who caused problems. Palmer joined the academy at 24. He passed firearms easily. Defensive tactics were his strongest evaluations. De-escalation less so. His supervisors described him as confident, assertive, sometimes rigid. In his first 2 years on patrol, he collected complaints. Not enough to end a career, just enough to form a pattern. A man detained too long for asking questions. A woman cited for obstruction when she filmed an arrest. Each complaint closed, not sustained. Insufficient evidence. Palmer learned the unspoken lesson. If you sound sure, if you write your report cleanly, if you control the scene, the system will carry you. He did not see himself as biased. He saw himself as efficient. When people challenged him, he read it as disrespect. When someone spoke calmly but refused to submit, he felt exposed. That night at the station, he had already worked 11 hours. The rain made everyone irritable. A supervisor had corrected him earlier in front of a trainee. He was already tight when the woman refused to step outside. In his mind, the story wrote itself. A difficult civilian, a challenge to authority. A quick arrest would restore order. He never considered that the woman standing in front of him had spent decades inside courtrooms like this one, watching men like him underestimate consequences. By the time the holding door closed behind her, 2 lives built on opposite understandings of power had collided in the narrowest possible space, and only one of them truly understood what came next. The door to the holding area swung open, and the sound pulled attention from every corner of the lobby. 2 officers escorted her forward. The cuffs were still tight. Not cruelly so, but firm enough to remind her that control had shifted. Her heels clicked once on the concrete floor, then stopped as she was guided toward a plastic chair bolted to the ground. "I would like to speak with a supervisor," she said, voice steady, volume unchanged. Officer Palmer didn't respond. He was already walking away, shoulders stiff, jaw set. To him, the arrest was complete. The paperwork would come later. The woman sat down slowly. She adjusted her posture despite the cuffs, shoulders back, chin level. She did not slump. She did not plead. Around her, the station moved on. A young officer whispered something to his partner near the vending machines. A dispatcher glanced over her monitor, eyes lingering for half a second too long before snapping back to the screen. Someone near the entrance lifted a phone, hesitated, then slid it back into a pocket. She noticed everything. "Officer," she said again, addressing a different uniform passing by. "Can you tell me who the watch commander is tonight?" The officer slowed, uncomfortable. He looked toward Palmer's back, then toward the desk sergeant. He didn't answer. He kept walking. Minutes passed. 5, 10. She shifted her wrists slightly, testing the cuffs. The metal bit into her skin. She inhaled slowly, exhaled even slower. Her mind was already cataloging details. Time, badge numbers, camera placement, the angle of the ceiling dome camera above her left shoulder. "This is all being recorded," she said calmly, not to anyone in particular. That sentence landed differently. A woman waiting near the desk leaned closer to her companion. A patrol officer across the room straightened, suddenly aware of the cameras that had faded into background noise years ago. At the far end of the lobby, Officer Palmer was speaking in low tones to the desk sergeant. He gestured once, sharp, impatient. The sergeant frowned at the screen in front of him. "What's the charge?" the sergeant asked. "Disorderly conduct," Palmer said. She refused to comply. The sergeant glanced over. He saw a woman sitting quietly, hands cuffed back, straight eyes forward. Not yelling, not thrashing, not what disorderly usually looked like. "She's asking questions," Palmer added. trying to argue law. The sergeant sighed. You get her ID. Already did. Palmer hesitated. It's complicated. That word carried weight. Back in the chair, the woman spoke again, louder this time, not aggressive, just clear. I am requesting a supervisor. I am also requesting medical documentation for overly tight restraints. That did it. The desk sergeant stood. He walked over, boots heavy on the tile. He crouched slightly to her eye level. Ma'am, what's your name? She gave it. The sergeant nodded once and held out his hand. Palmer, bring me the ID. Palmer walked over, irritation flashing across his face. He handed it over. The sergeant looked down. His brow furrowed. He looked again, slower this time. He straightened. He turned back to her. Ma'am, do you have any additional identification? Yes, she said. It's in my coat pocket, left side. The sergeant retrieved it himself. He opened the wallet. His face changed almost imperceptibly, but she saw it. The tightening around the eyes, the pause that lasted just a beat too long. He closed the wallet. Palmer, wait here, the sergeant said quietly. He walked away toward the back offices without another word. The room felt different now. Conversations lowered, movement slowed. The woman remained seated, cuffs still on heart steady. She had seen this moment before, from the other side of the bench. The moment when power realizes it may have misjudged the room. The order came without ceremony. Take her to processing. Officer Palmer didn't look at her when he said it. He didn't need to. The decision had already been made, and reversing it now would mean admitting something he wasn't ready to face. Two officers approached. One unlocked the cuffs just enough to reposition them behind her back for walking. The metal scraped against skin already tender. She inhaled sharply, then steadied herself. She stood on her own. No resistance, no hesitation. As they led her down the narrow hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The walls closed in. Gray paint scuffed baseboards doors with narrow windows that revealed nothing but movement. Each step echoed measured, controlled. The sound of the lobby faded behind her. Ahead, a heavy door opened with a dull mechanical thud. The holding corridor smelled different. Old concrete. Sweat. Something metallic that never fully left the air. The officer on her left cleared his throat. You don't have to make this difficult, he muttered, not unkindly. She turned her head slightly. I'm not making anything difficult. I'm documenting. They didn't respond. She was guided into a small processing room. A bench against the wall. A camera in the corner. A desk bolted to the floor with a fingerprint scanner that had seen thousands of hands pass through it. Sit. She sat. The officer behind her tightened the cuffs again. Too tight this time. Deliberately. The pressure sent a dull ache up her forearms. She closed her eyes for half a second. Please note the time, she said, and the adjustment of restraints. One officer shifted his weight. The other avoided her gaze. Her mind detached from the physical discomfort and moved somewhere colder, sharper. She noted the time in her head. 8:03 p.m. She noted the badge numbers stitched above their pockets, the camera angle, the absence of a supervisor. This was not her first time seeing injustice up close. It was simply the first time she was seated on this side of the wall. The door closed. Silence settled thick and unnatural. No scanner beeps, no paperwork sounds. Just the hum of electricity and her own breathing. Inside, the quiet thoughts moved quickly. She thought about precedent. About cases where disorderly conduct charges had been used as placeholders for wounded pride. About opinions she had written that said, clearly questioning police is not a crime. Remaining calm is not obstruction. Silence is not guilt. She thought about how many people sat on benches like this without knowing those words. The door opened again. Officer Palmer stepped in. He didn't sit. He stood just inside the frame, arms crossed, trying to reclaim something. You could have avoided this, he said. She looked up at him. Her eyes were level, focused. So could you. For a moment he said nothing. Then his voice hardened. You think you're smarter than everyone in this building? No, she replied. I think the law applies whether you like the tone of the person invoking it or not. That landed wrong. Palmer's jaw clenched. He turned away abruptly and spoke to the officer by the desk. Book her. The fingerprint scanner beeped as her hand was pressed down. The cuffs were loosened just enough to allow it. The machine chirped again, dissatisfied. The officer pressed harder. She winced just slightly. Make a note of that, she said quietly. The officer froze. Looked at her. Looked at the camera. He adjusted his grip. The photograph came next. Flash. White light. Her face was calm, expression neutral. No tears, no anger, just record. As she was led toward the holding cell, she heard voices rising somewhere down the hall. A door opening fast. Footsteps that didn't sound routine. A different tone entered the air. Urgent, controlled, wrong place, wrong time. She sat on the cold bench inside the cell. The door closed with a heavy click. The sound vibrated through the concrete. She rested her hands in her lap cuffs, still on pulse steady. Whatever came next, she was ready, because she knew something Officer Palmer did not. This was no longer just an arrest. It was evidence. The holding cell door had been closed for less than 6 minutes when the rhythm of the station changed. Footsteps moved faster now. Purpose replaced routine. A door down the corridor opened hard enough to echo. Voices dropped into a register that carried authority without needing volume. Officer Palmer was at the desk when the call came through. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "Verify that again," the voice on the other end said. Palmer stared at the screen in front of him, the name blinking back in black letters that suddenly felt heavier than they should have. He swallowed and retyped it. Slower this time. Careful. Exact. The system responded instantly. Status confirmed. He felt the heat drain from his face. Down the hall, the desk sergeant had gone very still. He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the monitor, then reached for the phone without looking away. "Get the watch commander in here. Now." Inside the cell, she heard none of this. She sat upright on the bench, hands resting loosely despite the cuffs, eyes focused on the far wall. Her breathing was even. The ache in her wrists had settled into a dull reminder, nothing more. She had replayed this moment many times in other people's stories. She knew the signs. The sudden silence, the pause before movement, the way a building holds its breath when truth is about to enter a room uninvited. The cell door opened. She looked up. 2 figures stood outside now. One was the desk sergeant. The other wore a different uniform. No patrol belt, no rush. Captain's bars caught the overhead light. "Ma'am," the captain said carefully. "May I speak with you?" She stood as best she could. The cuffs rattled softly. The captain nodded once to the officer behind him. The cuffs came off. The pressure vanished so suddenly it almost hurt more than it had before. She rotated her wrists slowly, deliberately. They stepped into a small interview room. The door closed, but this time it was not a cage. It was a space for conversation. The captain sat. He did not lean back. He placed both hands flat on the table. "My name is Captain Andrew Lewis. I'm the watch commander tonight. I want to apologize for what's occurred." She did not respond immediately. She waited. Let the words finish landing. "Your identity has been verified," he continued. "There appears to have been a serious misunderstanding." She met his eyes. "A misunderstanding implies ambiguity, Captain." He nodded once. "You're right." There was a pause. The kind that acknowledged damage without trying to outrun it. Officer Palmer stood outside the room, now visible through the glass. His posture had changed. Shoulders drawn in, hands clasped in front of him like a man waiting for a verdict. The captain cleared his throat. "Judge," he said quietly. The words settled into the room like gravity. "I would like to release you immediately," Captain Lewis continued. "Your charges will be dropped. All records expunged." She folded her hands on the table. No tremor, no hesitation. "I will be released immediately," she said. "And I will receive copies of all video recordings, reports, and internal communications related to my arrest." The captain nodded again. "Of course." And she added, "I would like the names and badge numbers of every officer involved, including those who observed and did not intervene." Another pause, longer this time. "Yes, ma'am?" From behind the glass, Palmer looked away. The captain stood. He opened the door himself. He did not gesture. He stepped aside. She walked out of the interview room with her head high, wrists, still marked, posture unchanged. Officers along the corridor stopped pretending to be busy. No one spoke. At the front desk, the desk sergeant avoided her eyes. Palmer stood rigid, face pale, fixed on a spot just above her shoulder. She paused in front of him. "Officer," she said calmly, "you arrested me for disorderly conduct." He swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. You will have the opportunity to explain that decision under oath." She turned and walked toward the exit. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. The night air was cold, clean, sharp. She stepped through the doors and stopped under the overhang, breathing in deeply for the first time since she had arrived. Inside, the station phones were already ringing, because the truth had been identified, and now it would move forward whether anyone was ready or not. The lawsuit was filed 48 hours later. 27 pages, single-spaced, federal court. Every paragraph was deliberate. Every citation precise. Timestamps, camera angles, officer statements quoted verbatim against body camera footage. What had happened inside that station was no longer a story. It was a record. The complaint alleged unlawful arrest, false imprisonment, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, and retaliation for protected speech. It named Officer Mark Palmer individually. It named the department. It named the city. By noon on the day it was filed, the chief of police had been briefed twice. By evening, the mayor's office was involved. The internal affairs investigation moved faster than usual, too fast to ignore. Palmer was placed on administrative leave pending review. His badge and service weapon were surrendered. His body camera footage was pulled. Dispatch logs reviewed. The station cameras synced and archived. The footage was devastating. There was no shouting, no aggression, no disorder, just a woman asking questions, just an officer escalating because he could. When the video leaked, it didn't need commentary. It spread across social media in fragments. 10 seconds of cuffs clicking shut. A still frame of her sitting upright in the holding cell. A silent clip of officers standing by while nothing unlawful occurred. By the end of the week, the video had been viewed millions of times. Comment sections filled with stories. People describing being arrested for tone, for questions, for existing in the wrong space at the wrong moment. Legal analysts stitched the clips together and explained calmly exactly how the law had been broken. The department released a statement expressing concern and commitment to transparency. It satisfied no one. Internal Affairs concluded its investigation in 18 days. The findings were clear. Officer Palmer lacked probable cause. The arrest violated department policy and constitutional standards. Multiple officers failed to intervene. Supervisory oversight was insufficient. Palmer was terminated. No ceremony, no press conference, just a letter citing cause effective immediately. His appeal was denied. The union declined arbitration after reviewing the footage. The city moved quickly to settle. The number was high enough to require city council approval, high enough to make headlines. Taxpayers paid attention. So did other departments. The judge did not attend the vote. She didn't need to. Part of the settlement required policy changes. Mandatory constitutional refresher training. Clearer guidelines on disorderly conduct arrests. Body camera audits reviewed by an independent civilian board. Another clause required the footage to be used in training, not as punishment, as instruction. Officer Palmer's name became a footnote in legal briefings. A cautionary example: he never returned to law enforcement. His certification was revoked. Private security companies declined his applications. The judge returned to the bench. She did not mention the incident in public. She did not give interviews. But in her courtroom, attorneys noticed something subtle. She paused longer before rulings. She asked officers sharper questions. She required clearer articulation. Not louder, clearer. When disorderly conduct charges came before her, she scrutinized every word, because now she had lived the consequences of imprecision. Justice had not been loud, it had been methodical, and it had been complete. What happened inside that station was not a misunderstanding. It was a textbook violation. Under the Fourth Amendment, an arrest requires probable cause. Not suspicion, not irritation, not wounded pride. Probable cause means specific articulable facts that a crime has occurred. Disorderly conduct is not a catch-all. It requires behavior that is loud, violent, obstructive, or threatening in a way that disrupts public order. Asking questions is not disorderly conduct. Remaining calm is not disorderly conduct. Refusing to leave a public area without a lawful order is not disorderly conduct. Courts across the United States have ruled on this repeatedly. Speech alone, even critical speech directed at police, is protected. The Supreme Court has been clear. The Constitution does not require submission to unlawful authority. What escalated that night was not behavior, it was ego. Psychologically, situations like this follow a predictable pattern. An authority figure issues a command without legal foundation. When the subject does not immediately comply, the authority interprets calm resistance as defiance. The presence of bystanders and cameras intensifies the threat to status. Instead of reassessing, the authority doubles down. This is how bias operates. Not always loudly, often quietly, through assumptions about who is allowed to question and who must comply. The most dangerous part is not the first mistake. It is the silence that follows. Officers who observe but do not intervene become part of the violation. Systems that reward confidence over correctness amplify the harm. So what should you do if this happens to you? First, control your voice and your body. Calm is protection. Loud emotion can be mischaracterized. Calm creates contrast. Second, ask clear questions. Am I being detained? What crime am I suspected of? Am I free to leave? These questions matter. Third, document if you can. Cameras change behavior. If you cannot record, remember details. Time, names, locations, badge numbers. Fourth, do not argue roadside law. Comply if necessary, but state clearly that you do not consent and you are complying under protest. Compliance preserves safety. Documentation preserves justice. Finally, get legal help immediately. Do not assume accountability will happen on its own. This story ended with consequences because the evidence was clear and the person detained understood the system. Most people do not have that advantage. That is the real lesson. Justice should not depend on your title, your education, or your ability to articulate constitutional doctrine under pressure. It should apply evenly, especially when no one important is watching. The question for the audience is simple. How many people have been arrested for the same behavior without cameras, without resources, without a judge's name on the paperwork? And how many times did the system look away? If this story made you uncomfortable, it should have. Discomfort is where awareness begins. If it made you angry, ask why. And if it made you think, then it did its job.
Seeking the truth is our ultimate mission. We dig deep to hold power to account, relying entirely on facts and data. Remember, the records never lie. Thank you for tuning in and supporting our work.